You can see on the screen that today's agenda, we're just going to do about 15 or 20 minutes of demonstration about Studiocode's capabilities. You know, a lot of you I'm familiar, I know you're familiar with Studiocode already to some degree because a lot of your names are familiar. And then, you know, after that, you can ask questions about really anything Studiocode related. I guess for those of you who don't know me, I'm Justin Tanisawa. I'm the North American Support Manager at Vosaic. We make Studiocode. You'll probably, if you have questions about Studiocode or any of our products from a support standpoint, they usually filter through me. So you'll probably come in contact with me sooner or later if you haven't already. You can see at the bottom, you can email anything support related to support@vosaic.com. And probably worth mentioning that this webinar is going to be a series the first Wednesday of each month at 12 Central Time. So you can put that on your calendar and hopefully make some more of them if they're valuable. Okay, so yeah, like I said, stop anytime, unmute yourself, and ask a question or type a question in the chat box. But the thought with this webinar for this week is that, you know, when you first start using Studiocode, there's a fair amount of features in Studiocode, and it could be a little overwhelming. So I just thought we'd go through a little high-level functionality and give you a sense of some of the big sort of widgets or modules in Studiocode, just so you have a sense of the capabilities and all that Studiocode can do. That way, once you get started, or wherever you are in your workflow, you know, you kind of know where you are in the big picture. So the table that I have up, you know, I can send everyone later, but if the thought is these are the things I'm going to show today, or the capture window. There's not a specific name for this in terms of terminology, but in terms of the concept, it's just recording or using pre-recorded video files. For example, files you've recorded on a camcorder. Then I'll talk about the code window, the matrix, the sorter window, the movie organizer, the instance frequency report, which is like a built-in report, and a stat window. Try to get through that pretty quickly. It'll be very high level. I'm not going to, you know, actually teach you how to do any of these things, but at least you'll have a sense of most of the moving parts in Studiocode. All right. So with that, I'll hide the agenda there. And so first thing is with Studiocode, you're familiar with, you know, this code window and the movie package probably, depending on which domain or, you know, industry you work in, whether typically it's something healthcare or in ed research or in the education space, just getting the video into Studiocode usually is the first step in anyone's process, right? So the two typical ways that can be done, the first way is to use what we call the capture window. So imagine my computer being connected to a camera of some kind. It could be, you know, like in BYU's case, they have some cameras in simulation rooms. It could just be a camcorder. It could even be, in this case, I don't have a camera. It'll default to the camera on my, the FaceTime camera on my computer. But you can open what we call the capture window. And now you can see me talking, and, you know, you can see the video being ingested and recorded in real time. So in the education space, this isn't too typical, but if you had the inclination, you could bring a camcorder to a classroom and record in real time. And that would save you some of the steps from the second part of the process. I'm going to close this window. I just wanted to give you a quick sense of what the recording or the capture window looks like. So I'll close this. In many cases, like in the ed space, like I was saying, you have pre-recorded movie files that you've recorded from a camcorder, and it just you copy that to your Mac, and it just comes across as a QuickTime movie. And you know, you can make a movie package out of it. And in that process, for those who have done it, you usually have to transcode or convert the video into, you know, a more ideal format so it sort of plays nice with Studiocode. Either way, whether you record or capture with the Studiocode capture window, or you use a pre-recorded movie file, you end up with this file that we call a movie package, that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And then the next thing I'm going to talk about is this window up here called the code window, which is used to actually code or mark the video, right? So the general idea here is that with a window like this, I could click, for example, let's say on any of these buttons here, let's just say taxi, and if I click on that button now, it'll mark what we call an instance on the timeline wherever the playhead is. You can see the playhead, this red vertical bar is here, so it just marked this instance. Maybe some things you're not familiar with the code window. You can add pictures if they're more intuitive than the actual word or text. So like this button will mark, the name for it is pedestrian, but I'm just choosing to use an image instead of the actual text because I'm thinking that will be more intuitive. You can always drop those images into into the code window, sorry, to make them more useful or intuitive. In addition to these code buttons that mark points in the timeline and show up as these physical instances, there are also what we call labels. And labels, question from somebody? No, okay. So labels basically are just ways to apply subcategories or other little labels, essentially, or tags to existing instances. So on this instance, for example, in the, let's say this first pedestrian instance, you can see up here where my mouse is just above the number line that there are some labels there. That's what we call them. For example, Elm and Broadway. And the more typical way to view the labels is if I open this window called the matrix. It gives you a quick sense of how many labels are on how many instances. For example, this Elm label is on 16 bus instances. And if I single click on that cell, it finds them in the timeline. And if I double click on them, on that cell, it will go and retrieve the actual clips there, which you can see in this new movie window. Okay. So there's a lot more you can do in the matrix to sort of filter and drill down for more specific combinations or buckets of video. Like I could find all the times a bus came from the east and made a turn or something like that. Okay, let me check out this question 1 second. Yeah, good question about exclusive links. I'm not going to talk about that in this. Well, I mean, if you have a question afterwards, I'm happy to show you, but I'm trying to stay high level and just give everyone a broad strokes idea of some of the moving parts, but good question. I can answer that later for sure. Okay, so the matrix is typically a window that people use fairly often. I'll go ahead and close that. In addition to the matrix, there's a window that's called the sorter. So let me choose a row here. I can choose any number of instances, and if I click on this button on the timeline, it takes those instances or clips and dumps them into the sorter. Now the sorter is a spreadsheet style window, as you can see, and each row is an instance. So this is the first instance in the pedestrian row. But what's nice about it, especially for those of you who are doing qualitative work, is that you can see here, the row name, obviously, but then you can see all the labels at a glance. And it gives you a little more maybe context about what happened on this given instance. You can do things like add new labels, remove labels. This column is called the transcription column. It was meant to be used as a way to transcribe what's being said in the video. But typically, or alternatively, a lot of people just use it to type comments and notes, to other colleagues, for example, about what you think is noteworthy about the clip. So it can be used for either of those purposes. So yeah, I'm just scrolling down here. So for example, I could watch this first clip. Actually, let me do this. I can watch clip by clip here. Can you see if I just click on a new row, it just plays a new video there. So that's called the sorter window. I'll go ahead and close that. The next thing I want to show you is what we call the movie organizer. This is a feature that's really useful if, for example, you need to create a presentation, like maybe a standalone movie that plays start to end, that tells the story of your work or something like that. Think of it maybe as a simpler keynote or PowerPoint, something to that effect. So like, let's say, I've coded these 3 rows and I'm creating a presentation for like a single movie. I could take these clips or any number. I'll just take a handful here so you can see that you don't have to take the whole row. And then I'll dump them into what we call the organizer, the movie organizer. And this window here you can see is this same subset of clips in a new window. But the beauty of this is now, for example, let's say this clip, all right, let me show you this first. If I click make movie here, or the movie icon, it will make a movie of all the clips in this movie organizer by row from left to right. So you can see, let me click here, you can see all the pedestrian clips happen first, then the stroller, then the couple bicycle clips. So if I wanted to create a presentation from these clips, maybe I coded this instance first in the pedestrian row, but I don't necessarily want to show it first in my presentation. I can just simply click and drag it somewhere else in the row or between rows if I want. Or maybe I decide I don't want to show that clip at all. I can just delete it. I can rearrange the rows here. If I don't want to show the bicycle row, I can just uncheck that. Sorry. If I don't want to show this row, I can just uncheck it. And then when I make the movie, it's not made to the final movie. I could also just single click and check this titles box. Now if I make a movie, it'll generate title slides based on the name here, which I can also edit. So the point really is, in the movie organizer, I can make many different changes and edits here without interrupting my actual work right down in the timeline. So that's the movie organizer. I'm not going to save this. There are a few built-in reports to Studiocode that can be valuable depending on what your work, what you're trying to do with your work. So one of them is the instance frequency report. So if you go up to the File, Export, and this instance frequency report, you can choose to open it in Excel or just within Studiocode. That's what this means. So I just open it in Studiocode. And then you can see here that you get a quick report. It gives you basically by row the number of instances in that row. So there's 116 instances in the taxi row. The total time that they make up. So that's 7 minutes, 29.01 seconds. And that's 22.67% of the entire timeline. And then the mean time per instance is 3.87 seconds. So, you know, if you're doing work that is duration related, this might have some value for you there. I'll close that. In addition to this built-in reports, this built-in report, there are a couple others, but for sake of time, I'm going to just move on to the custom reports, so you're familiar with this. The custom reports typically are generated in what we call the statistical window or the stat window. So the way you can create one is just go to File, New, Statistical Window. You can see that it opens up like just a blank spreadsheet. And the idea with this guy is that you can type little formulas in these cells that just read the open timeline and return information. So, for example, just simply, I'll give you something simple like, let's say I wanted to just know a count of how many bus instances there are. So I can say type bus here, number of instances. And then within this cell, much like you would type a formula in Excel, if you're familiar with that, you can type these little scripts. That then when you click execute, return, oh, sorry, it's taxi. I said bus here, but I typed taxi, but you get the idea. Is when you type these little scripts, they can return some information to these cells. So this statistical window can become an interactive report, because if I open up this statistical window with another movie package, all these instances, all this count will just regenerate. So you can save this stat window as a template and open it up with different movie packages. You know, I could go on and show you some more functionality within the stat window, but I'm going to open it up to any questions that people have now, because I'm sure that'd be more valuable. So please feel free to unmute and ask anything that you might have any questions about.
Hi, Justin.
Hi there.
We are looking at organizing by timestamp rather than by code. You talked about organizing by code. Can you also organize by timestamp?
Sure. In terms of, were you thinking about in the sorter window?
Yeah. So when you brought up, you highlighted, you know, those instances across 3 different rows.
Uh-huh.
And then you brought up that window.
The sorter?
And sorter, yep.
Okay.
Now, could you organize those? Actually, that is organized by timestamp.
No, it's not. It's organized.
But it's
organized by code, right? Like it just, so can you reorganize that, the blue and yellow, so that it's by timestamp?
Yeah, definitely. So if you right click on the column number at the top, or control click, sorry, not the column number, where it says time reference.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, thanks.
Sort, yeah, by that ascending or descending timestamp. That work for you? Any other questions I can help answer?
I'll ask another question.
Yeah, please.
We've been recently noticing that if you click on the transcription window or the transcription button, it's tied to a particular instance. And then every time I try to save it, it seems like it's saving it as a new file. Can you remind me, because I did this a while ago, a few years ago, but can't remember how to do it. How do you merge them or just save them as one file? Like you said, the sorter window can be used as transcription, but that's not how it was designed. What is the way that transcription was designed?
Yeah, good question. So first of all, I'd say if you're using Studiocode version 10, whether you're transcribing or not, you should use the sorter. The sorter window does everything the transcription window does and then some. So even though, you know, it's not branded transcription window, you certainly can use it for transcription, and it has all that functionality. So
in other words, you can watch the video and transcribe in it and toggle like from instance to instance as you like with the tab or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. So let me show you that. Let me minimize these things. And so I'll grab a handful of instances here, and I'll dump them into the sorter. When you use the sorter, what I like to do first is sort of, you can see, you know, your windows take up, I don't know, depending on your movie size and whatnot, you know, a fair amount of real estate. So the first thing I like to do is click on this position button up in the top left corner of the sorter window, and then it just rearranges your windows to sort of maximize the real estate. Can you see on my screen how it does that? You may have to click on the position button multiple times on your particular computer, and it'll keep reorienting them until it finds the most optimal layout, I guess, on your screen. So once you do that, if you still have the timeline open, I would check this box. You can see my mouse. Check this box just above the number 1, the first row, and then just single click on any timestamp cell, time reference here in the first column. Now you can see if I single click on any instance down here in the sorter, can you see the playhead in the timeline sort of jumping around and moving to the corresponding instance? And then the movie window just updates, you know, to reflect whatever instance the playhead is on. Is that what you were asking?
Sorry, Justin, I went to a different computer with Ruth, my graduate student. Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. And then you can see actually in the sorter window, this column is still actually even called transcription. So meaning the transcription window and the sorter window are that similar.
Yep, that's helpful. Thank you so much.
Sure. What else? Any other questions I can help with? Kind of put this back. No? Ken, BYU folks, anything? Colleen?
No, not right now, Justin, but
Okay.
it's all interesting.
Okay, so maybe one other thing I'll show everyone that isn't automatically familiar or obvious to people is in the code window here. If you ever want to get real-time feedback while you're coding, you can do things like this. You see what this is just a button here, and it's counting the number of instances in that taxi row. So for example, if I'm coding and let's say I code another taxi clip right here, you see it just went to 117, now 118, 119. I can, you know, go to this other mode. You guys, everyone's probably familiar with edit mode and code mode, but there's another less used mode called report mode, where you can do things like, I have this button set in a way that when I double click on it, it actually goes and retrieves all those instances from the taxi row. So what's interesting about that from a lot of our customer standpoints is that since you can drop images into this code window, you could start using the code window possibly as the mechanism to drive a debrief or a meeting, because you could drop maybe like an infographic or something more visually appealing or intuitive than our timeline to pull up clips, if that makes sense. Like you could pull up, you know, like an image of an intersection and click on a particular direction that a car is coming from, and those instances will pull up straight from the code window, not from the timeline. So, you know, if you're doing any sort of presentation or, an infographic, or you're thinking about ways to present data that could have some value to you, you could count instances, label instances with a particular label or combinations of labels. You could have this reflect a percentage. You could have it display durations. Really anything that you've coded or labeled in the timeline, you can calculate and return in the code window, if that makes sense. Anything else? Well, thanks to everyone for attending. We really appreciate it. Please feel free to email support@vosaic.com or myself, justin.tanisawa@vosaic.com, with any webinar topic ideas, or, if you have more specific questions, obviously email either of those addresses. But if you have any ideas about what you'd like to see the webinar series, in terms of content, show or teach, please feel free to let us know.
Justin, do you have a minute to stay on and answer our questions about the exclusive links, or would later be a good time?
No, sure, of course.
So I watched the YouTube video about labels, and that you can either exclusively link a label or not. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering why you would ever not link the label exclusively.
Yeah, good question. I think in the ed research space, exclusively linking a label to a code is certainly the default and overwhelming choice. I mean, everyone would normally do that. I guess an example of when maybe you wouldn't exclusively link a label to a code, and just for those of you that are still on, or just to reiterate that if you don't exclusively link a label to a code, the way I always say it is that when you click on a label, it sort of sprays out to any code that might be on it. In your domain, that's probably problematic. But in some cases, let's say in this video, it's at a particular site, like, whatever, this is University of California. So I added a label or whatever. Let's say this is PS Public School 12. And the group for this label is school or schools. And I want this label to apply to every instance in the timeline, because in the end, I want to be able to pull up, let's say, any instance, any bus instance with a North label on it and a PS12 label on it, right? In this case, maybe I don't use any exclusive links and I use like label mode. And in label mode, I can select all instances when I'm, theoretically done coding. And then once they're all selected, if I click this label now, that just got applied to all the instances in the timeline. So, typically as a blanket statement, let's say like demographic types of labels, like date, location, maybe participant names that are in the video, if that applies to your work, that those might be use cases for using labels without exclusive links.
Thanks, that was really helpful.
Sure.
Justin, do you also happen to know all of the support websites for Vosaic are currently down? Do you know when they're coming back?
Oh, they're currently down?
Well, at least they were like 20 minutes ago.
I did not know that, and I thought I was just on one, so I can look into that as soon as I get off. But
So if I try to go to the knowledge base or any of the articles there, this page pops up saying currently unavailable under maintenance. We'll be back soon.
Yeah, sorry. The knowledge base, I was aware. The platform we use for that, there's an issue, so hopefully it'll be up yesterday.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks. That didn't dawn on me that the knowledge base was on that platform. Let's see what else. Best way to make the video screen bigger. Yeah, I hear you. So I think you're talking about the movie window here on the timeline. So this depends on a couple of things. Number one, the size the resolution of your particular Mac. Whether, if you have an older Mac and a lower resolution screen, you won't have as many pixels to scale by. And then the other factor is the resolution of the movie itself. So you can see on my screen, if I click here, it makes it bigger, but it won't go any larger than that. So on this screen, I think I can only view it. I can view it 3 sizes. But typically, like this Mac is pretty new and pretty high resolution. It's 2 sizes. There is no click and drag on this particular movie window. So yeah, you're usually subject to the couple options that you're finding right now, I'm guessing. That's why typically we recommend a 15-inch monitor or laptop for those of you that are working on laptops, because it gives you a lot more real estate than the 13-inch screens. Anything else coming to mind?
Can I ask another question about coding?
Yeah, of course.
So as you can imagine, when we're doing a first pass through coding, let's just say it's an interview, it's nice to sort of code with a first pass, just the interviewer and then the interviewee.
Okay.
And so it would be great I know that you can do this, I just can't remember how. It would be great to remember how to toggle on one code and toggle off at the exact same time.
Oh yeah, sure. Great question. So if I bring down 2 code buttons, because I'm assuming that's what you have, interview, interviewee, then just go to the exclusive link. Previously we were talking about an exclusive link between a label and a code, but when it's between 2 codes, so I'm on button 30. I'm going to go to button 29. Let me drag this out, and you should have this little button at the top that lets you view the links above, below, or to hide the links. But you can see the exclusive link there. So once you have 2 code buttons exclusively linked, they act as a toggle like that. I think that's what you're asking.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks, Justin.
And if you have a lead time on a given button, it will still be accounted for. Like you'll still, like there will be some overlap. Or how about I just show you instead of talking?
So what if you have labels associated with those codes? If you just clicked the label, would that also toggle off the linked other code? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, so like you have, like here you can see my window, I have north, south, east, west, which are labels actively and exclusively linked to bus. But now you're saying you have bus and taxi exclusively linked?
Right. Let's say we had bus and taxi exclusively linked, and we had just tagged the label west on the bus. And then...
Let's do that. So I'll exclusively link taxi to bus. You're wondering if the toggle will still work?
Right.
Yeah, it will. So here, I hit south, which turned on bus. Let me put those below. I'll hit north. Sorry. Bus has a lag time. Let me take that off. Bus, we'll take off the lag time. Taxi, we'll take off the lag time. Go to code mode. So now if I hit north, bus stays on. If I hit any of these labels, it activates taxi, turns off bus.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think there was a question up here, or maybe closed captioning. we were just talking about that on our side of the fence. Okay, so let's define closed captioning for a second. I'll show you what you can do in Studiocode. On any given instance here, like this number 14 instance, if in the timeline you click the text label, you can just free type something that maybe that's being said. Typically, this method is not very efficient, right? Is to click an instance because you'd have to watch it, then keep clicking the text icon. So what people typically do is select some instances, go to the sorter, and this column here is where you can type what's being said. So that gets the information onto the instance, but then in terms of displaying it, here's a couple options from settings. If you have this checkbox, which is overlay text, checked, then when you watch clips, it will play this where you see the instance number, all the labels that are on that given instance, and then the transcription. This is called overlay text, and you can turn off, I'll just show you really quickly, Studiocode preferences, overlay. You can turn off, what's nice about overlay text is you can turn off the code and the label and just show the instance notes there. You see that? So you can choose to show them one at a time. You can do that with overlay text. I'll turn that back on just for a second. Another option here is what we call transcription text or text tracks. So what that does is it plays the same information, but in a black space below the video. With this transcription text, as opposed to overlay text, you don't have the capability of turning off the instance number and labels. So you'll just see that stuff and the whatever you've transcribed or typed below will display down here in the black area. So maybe in terms of advantages, disadvantages, one, with overlay text, you can turn off the labels, but maybe it might obscure your video a little bit. So in that case, you might want to use this transcription text, which displays it below. All that being said, with either option, the text that you've typed is not synced with the person that's speaking. So for example, if you have someone maybe that's speaking, for 30 seconds, a minute, or multiple minutes, and you're having paragraphs of utterances, that's not going to sync with what, their lips, their mouth, basically. So when you're saying closed captioning, typically I think people assume it or are wanting it to be synced, and that's not the case right now. Okay, good deal. Other questions? Other thoughts on future webinar topics? Anything like that? You can obviously email as well.
Justin, did I understand correctly that it's okay to upgrade to Sierra now on our Mac Minis?
It is, but I believe You guys are on version 5, Studiocode? In which case it wouldn't
No,
be.
we upgraded to 10.
Oh, okay, sorry. Then yes. Then yes. Good question. Anything else? All right, well, great. Thanks for taking the time, everyone. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you in a month. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks.